Hey guys, welcome to the Block Podcast. Once again, it's your boy Vic. We have taken a long break because I've been so busy with school. I literally just recently graduated. Yay. So I've been so busy with school, I never really had time to like do the podcast the way I wanted to do it. But now that I'm back, I'm getting back to it and I'm excited. So on the first episode back, I actually shot this episode we had in the past, like last year, but something happened with the audio that was really bad, and I don't know why. But we're shooting again, and then this time it's gonna be out actually, because this is actually a really good, informative topic that I think a lot of people would be interested in or would learn from. So yeah. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about traumas and how that affects our relationships. So today we have our lovely guest, Tighisti. She's Eritrea, and she's here to talk. She's also like she knows a lot about trauma and stuff like that. So we are going to be talking about that.
Yeah. Dope.
Yeah.
Dope. I'm glad we finally got to it.
I'm glad we finally got. I'm glad we finally got to it, man. Okay, so yeah, do you want to just talk to us about like traumas and like the different type and stuff like that?
Yeah. So trauma is like it's become a catchphrase for a lot of people nowadays. On the other hand, it's a really good thing because people are beginning to recognize how their previous pain impacts them. So trauma is in it can come in any form.
Yeah.
The definition of trauma is a wound, right? And the reason that it's a wound is because some sort of pain occurred and you haven't fully healed from something. But you don't get over trauma, you get through it. And so literally the term means wound. Now if you think about a wound or versus a scar, it's very different. A scar doesn't hurt anymore. But if you have a wound, it's like anytime, let's say you get a cut on your hand, if you have a wound, anytime you kind of brush up against it, it's still hurting.
Yeah.
And so when we think about trauma, there's two types. I mean, there's all types, but literally there's big T, like what they call big T, big trauma. And that's like, you witnessed a horrific event.
Yeah.
Someone got killed, someone, these like huge events.
Yeah.
But you can also experience trauma, what they call little t,
Okay.
in terms of, say, if you were like neglected as a child, like your parents gave you everything, but they never gave you attention. And so what ends up happening is that this particular pain, in whatever form you experienced it, physically, emotionally, or otherwise, it's embedded in your body.
Yeah.
And it begins to impact your emotions. And your emotions obviously impact how you behave and how you treat people.
Right.
And so when we get into relationships, we bring that trauma with us, and you find yourself interacting with a person, if you haven't fully dealt with your trauma, interacting with a person in a way that just like reinstates your own trauma. That's like reliving your trauma. You're easily triggered. You are not really fully authentically dealing with them. You're literally just dealing with your own pain through them, if that makes sense. Yeah, so there's a few responses that the body has to trauma, and that's just based on our need for survival.
Yeah.
Right? And so you experience the trauma, and because you needed to cope in that moment, you had one of maybe 3 to 4 responses. You freeze, you fight, you flight, and then the most recent one is fawn, which is like people pleasing. And so these become coping mechanisms. And then when we interact with people and we're triggered, now we go right back into that coping mechanism. So what initially was meant to like help you stay safe and survive now becomes maladaptive, because you don't need to do that anymore. You're not in that moment of whatever you experience. But when you're with this person, you're triggered and you automatically go to react in that same way.
I see that a lot. Like that's actually like it's crazy that it's a new one, because that actually happens a lot. Like you see a lot of people in new relationships and they haven't fully dealt with their past trauma, so their behavior towards this new relationship is based on like something happened in the past, like
Always.
something that happened in the past relationship, and like, or like, it's either they're too protective of their feelings, or like they have trust issues with
Yes.
wherever they're with, or like I've seen that like different
Yeah.
different times. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
actually crazy. That's like a new addition to the
Yeah,
thing.
especially the whole people pleasing, like the fawn. It's like, how many of us get into relationships and we just like, you know, there's all different types of people, but when we get in relationships, that's when you really learn about yourself. And we start people pleasing. We just don't want problems. We don't want confrontation. We don't know how to say no. We just go with the flow. And so
Yeah.
like that's that fawn response. Not setting boundaries. But then, like you said, someone who has trust issues is like, has a very strong like fight or flight, you know, response. And so like they're just automatically suspicious. They, you know, don't believe in trusting anybody. They're asking all type, you know what I mean? It just makes it really difficult if you don't know where you are dealing with someone from.
So like, okay, when if let's say someone that had past trauma, right, and they're like they've been dealing with that, and they have like trust issues from their past, right, and they are in a new relationship. How would you advise like them to like navigate that, as far as like the new relationship? How do they navigate and get past the trust issue that they have?
Yeah, I think so. First and foremost is like, you have to, in order to get through it, you have to actually like confront it. You have to see it. You can't just, you know, sometimes we
Skip it.
think we're over something, but we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And we suppress it, and then it shows up in ways we can't control. So the first step is to actually find out, ask yourself, like, why am I having this response? What has happened in the past that is causing this? If you're clear on what happened, like, you know, somebody might be like, oh, well, you know, I've been cheated on X amount of times, or every time I'm with a girl, she just da 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 da. Okay, but what about you is so afraid right now? That happened. Yes, we acknowledge that trauma happened. But now that you're here, why are you carrying it into this new relationship with this person? Right? And if you cannot trust a person, really you have to think about it and say, okay, maybe it's that I don't trust myself. You have to start with self, and you have to trust yourself enough to know that if something is not gonna work out, or something is not going well, or this person might do something to me, I trust myself enough to know that I will walk away, that I will be, you know, I will create healthy boundaries. If you cannot say that, if you do not know that, then maybe you should not be in a relationship per se. Maybe you need to just be in a relationship with yourself first. You know, because you're punishing someone for something
That
from
they
your
did.
past that they're not responsible for.
Right. I think a lot of people, I think therapy will help with that, because a lot of people don't like know how to actually even like deal with their past trauma. Some people don't even know that they have it, you know, and a lot of people are not like self-aware, or like haven't learned about these things, so they don't even know.
Yeah.
So like, I'm just gonna ask you, like, what are some ways that like someone can work on their trauma, or like Oh, before I even ask that, what are some ways that you can identify that you are dealing with past trauma
Yes.
in a relationship before?
Okay.
Yeah.
So trauma responses.
Okay.
You got to remember the F's: the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Right? So if you are around somebody and they're trying to be really kind to you, but you are just constantly argumentative, looking to create problems, and you're not conscious of it, but if you find yourself constantly looking for a problem, that's your fight response. You know, the flight response, someone is trying to do nice things for you, but you're constantly running away from them. You're constantly ghosting people, you know, avoiding conversations, etc. That's your flight response. You're trying to run away. The freeze is like not responding to issues when they come up, not speaking up on it, just kind of suppressing it. And then the fawn is just going with the flow, never really setting the boundaries and wanting to be a people pleaser. The beauty of trauma, as messed up as it is, we all have it. If you're born, you have trauma. Being born is trauma in and of itself. It's a traumatic event, right? But trauma lives in the body. So many people will often like get into their minds and into their heads and think it's just emotions, but emotions are chemicals and they live in your body. And so your fight, flight, freeze response, you know it if you've ever been like scared, nervous. Let's say cops stop you, all of a sudden your heart rate is racing, you feel like running or maybe freezing. These are natural responses that are in your system, in your body, to help you survive and to protect you. So when you find that your body's reacting a particular way around someone, you have to know, okay, why is my heart racing? Why am I like ruminating? Why am I you have to always ask yourself, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? And listen to your body. Listen to your body, because your body will always tell you the truth.
I was gonna ask, like, how does trauma affect our like communication and emotional intimacy within our relationships?
Oh, it comes back to awareness. If you are not aware of where your traumas are coming from, where your responses are coming from, then you're going to find yourself, I don't know if you've ever lost your temper. You don't seem like the type, but you know, you're going to find yourself in arguments with your partner or significant other, and you know, yelling and screaming or throwing a tantrum, and you're not sure why. And it could be a situation that calls for like a level 1 response and you're at like 10, or you go from 0 to 1,000. So trauma is it's unseen, as far as like, you know, it's a concept, but you're gonna see it in the way that you communicate with people. It can also sexual trauma. Like there are many people who have experienced sexual trauma in childhood, right? Or maybe in their teens. And that can also play a role in like their ability to intimately connect with someone. And so someone might just be really promiscuous, where they're like just, you know, doing everything with everybody, or they might be somebody that really has a hard time even getting close and intimate. There might be some body shame, you know. And so it's just really always asking, like, what's going on in my body? Why is this happening? What am I thinking? How does like what I'm thinking connect to what's happening in my body? Because if we don't, then you're going to have issues with intimacy. And there's a difference between sex and intimacy. You know, intimacy is the ability to be close to someone, to do things, and it's not necessarily sexually driven. But say someone who's experienced a lot of trauma and hasn't dealt with it, or hasn't had a chance to heal from it or through it, then they might find themselves having a hard time doing those things. But maybe they're able to connect sexually like easily, and that's because of the lack of intimacy. You know, intimacy requires trust.
So what are some techniques, like you say someone is dealing with trauma, and like they obviously there's like ways for them to find that you like spoke about that, so like for them to, what are the next step for someone that has trauma, for example, in a relationship? What's the next step for you to do as far as like being able to like solve, like where are some places that you can find solutions and stuff like that? I know like therapy is one of them, and like what are some other ones that you
so as a certified yoga teacher and wellness expert now, the work that I do, like I do one-on-one with clients, and it's centered around the body, because talking it may not work for everybody. So therapy is wonderful, it's necessary, and we need that, but there's so many different types of therapy, and so it's like figuring out what's going to work for me. For some people, it's not enough to just talk. You got to get into your body. That's where trauma lives.
How do you get into your body though?
So breathing, you know, it's breath work. So, you know, let's say you're experiencing, you know, you're waiting for him to call you back. You have trust issues. He hasn't called. What's going on? You're having a panic attack in that moment. Okay, taking a moment. And there's something called the physiological sigh. So that's like, we breathe in. We could do it together if you want. Breathe in through your nose. And you let it out through your mouth. And you make that noise, that... Now, you know, whenever you're around people, if you're like, they're like, what's wrong with you? but really it's really, really good for your nervous system. It actually calms you. So starting with breathing, awareness of your heart rate. There's also just asking yourself, what do I see? Like, to take yourself out of that state. What do I see? What do I hear? What do I smell? Things that don't have to do with your emotion in that moment. So like noticing things around you mindfully. Yoga is amazing for that. So just like some gentle stretching. If you're experiencing a certain level of anxiety, like you feel like flight, and just keep going. Grounding is really good. So like getting barefoot if you can, and just really connecting with the earth. So yeah, always just coming into your body, and your breath is like the most important way to get into that,
Actually, I didn't know that. My mom is always telling me, oh, she sends me a video and she's like, oh, you should try this meditation video or whatever. And I'm like, Mom, I'm like, okay, but I never really do it. But I might look into that a little more.
Yeah.
Maybe. But I'm fine. But like I feel like if I ever was in a situation where I need to like take a breather, I'm gonna like do that.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you don't have to like be in touch with trauma in a moment in order to benefit from like mindfulness or meditation or these other techniques. There's a reason why we have the LeBron James, with doing the mindfulness. You have like some of the top athletes and most successful people who engage in that, because it improves your cognitive function, it improves your relationships, your ability to communicate, and it's something as simple as breathing, and just like taking it slow and noticing what's happening within your body. Like that, I would say, is something you don't need someone else for. You don't need a therapist to do that. You don't need to see, experts or whatever for that. You could just do it.
Do it on your own.
Yeah. Which is easier said than done, because
yeah. Okay, another thing, I know like we talk about like how we can work on ourselves, for like how we can deal with our traumas and all that stuff. Like, okay, but now I wanted to talk about like how us as like a family, friend, a partner, how can we help someone, like let's say our partner was dealing with some trauma, some childhood trauma or whatever. How can we help them navigate that? How can we help them like go through that?
Yeah, therapy is of course important.
Okay.
Right, so you can refer someone, but I know that especially in our communities, in like the Black and brown communities, to tell somebody, hey, you should go to therapy, or therapy would be good for you, it's like, what you said? What do you mean go to therapy? So but really it's a tool, just like everything else in life, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so that's one suggestion. The other way is to really listen and only ask, what do you need? What do you need? How can I help? And not making assumptions or conclusions on like what they're supposed to need or how they're supposed to act or what they're supposed to do, but to really just ask them, what do you need? Some days they might need a cup of tea. Some days they might need to go for a walk. And really like draw them out. If you find that they're being withdrawn, like they're not coming outside often, they're not, socializing, check on them. Ask them to go for a walk. And like, I know in New York, we're also really quick to say like, the first thing we do is we say like, hey, let's go get drinks. But like, what if instead of that, if you like engage them to do something healthy, like let's go walk around the park, let's go to a yoga class together, or let's go work out. Let's get a tea, let's get a coffee. I know that doesn't sound as like, because if you're not helping them engage in like healthy activities to work through what they're working through, it's not going to help them in the long run. It's just like a temporary escape.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it. That's it. Because I think a lot of us, because we don't even know how to deal with our own trauma, we find it hard to like deal with like, or like help someone else. So I think learning about helping someone to deal with like that short term trauma versus like going through the long run with them is actually like very important, because I feel like you just said, like the things that we need to do, like, but like if I was like, for example, if I had a partner that had like some past trauma and stuff, I feel like I would like want to be more patient with them. I would be more considerate, more loving.
And also identify their triggers, right?
Yeah.
So what triggers you might not be what triggers me, and vice versa. And now we have this thing on like social media or like the news or whatever, which also news, you shouldn't be watching that like that, but you know, where they'll say like trigger warning, right? I think it's important to know what are, because just because a person experienced trauma doesn't mean that they can't be in a relationship or that they can't have a healthy relationship. Some of the most amazing people, most successful people have experienced unimaginable trauma, you know? And so it's also not pathologizing, like not looking at it as a disease or something. Like if someone's like, oh, well, I was raped as a child. Okay. That doesn't mean that everything that you deal with them, you know what I mean, has to be filtered through that trauma. But like you said, patience, understanding, questions are always great. Like questions as far as like what they need. But most importantly, you know, when they are exhibiting certain things, for you to just ask them, like, whether or not you know about the trauma is just like, what's triggering for you, what triggers you. And I think that's something we don't do enough of in relationships. We get into relationships and we love talking about the most wonderful things about ourselves, right? We want to be appealing, but we rarely talk about like, look, like some things that really trigger me, because we don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to open ourselves up and like, you know, maybe get hurt or whatever. But like, let people know, like, what triggers you, what upsets you, what, you know, what are some boundaries. When we don't do enough of that, we just kind of get into it, and I like you, you like me, and I'm the most amazing person in the world.
What about if like two people have like, if two people are like have traumatic backgrounds or whatever that actually affect them? How can like both of them? Because like now one person, we've been talking about like how one person
It's a trauma bond.
trauma, yeah, and then another person trauma bond is like a whole nother thing.
Right.
It's like it's a whole big topic that actually needs
Yeah.
to be talked about. But like
Yeah.
now there's like two people in a relationship that are actually like experiencing like trauma, right? And like they don't know how to like navigate it, and like you like, let's say they go into therapy but it's not really working and stuff like that. What is like the best advice that you can give them?
Take some time. It's okay to take some time. It doesn't mean
Take some
because
time apart.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it doesn't mean that you, because you experience trauma and you're trying to navigate through it, that you shouldn't be in a relationship. But if you've tried multiple things, it's okay to say like, let's take a moment. I'm gonna take some time to work on me. You take some time to work on you. So just take that time, or like figure out how you can create like new memories. Like, I know this happened to you, you know, this happened to me.
Right.
How can we create new memories together? Because that's going to like rewire your brain. That's going to replace, it doesn't change what happened, but it's going to replace, you know, because you don't want to live in your trauma forever either. You want to create new memories with that person, help them to experience joy, doing new things, learning new things together, like doing something neither one of you has ever done before. You know what I mean? And doing that can also help you not only like create a bond that's healthy, but also like it builds trust. Because it's like, wow, you didn't know how to do this, I didn't know how to do this, we did it together, that was amazing, you know. And so I think those are your two options. You have many options, but like one is to take some time if you've tried multiple things and you find yourself in that same cycle, rather than remain in a toxic relationship, is to like separate and do a self cleanse, and that's okay. The other option is to create new memories together, learn new things together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I ran out of questions that I want to ask you.
Yeah, it's
But
okay.
I think, yeah, those are like all the questions that I had on my stuff. So I would like to ask people, like, if you guys are experiencing trauma, what are some ways that you guys have like dealt with the trauma? What is the way have you guys like walked through it? If you're in like if your partner is like, if your partner experienced trauma, how have you guys navigated that? How have you helped the person go through that? You know, I would like to know all these things, so you can just leave them in the comment section. I'm glad to be back,
And then
I'm
ask
glad.
your questions. Like if you have questions about it, I definitely would love to know. Let me know.
Yeah.
you know, whatever you're going through, just know, number one, you're not alone.
Uh-huh.
Even if it feels like you're going through it alone,
You're
you
never
don't
alone.
have to be.
Yeah.
And reach out, ask for help, ask for support, because there's a power in that vulnerability.
There is. I think no, you're right. But yeah, I think guys, I think that's it for today.
All right.
We're gonna wrap it up. I hope you guys got a few things out of today's episode. I hope it was helpful, and yeah. And until next time, thank you guys for watching today's episode, and bye.
Peace.
Bye. Peace.